rebuttal. True or false? The defense does not get a rebuttal. False. You make your own rebuttal. You put a section in your outline, leave it blank, and as the other side's going, you just take some notes about what their arguments are. This allows you to respond on your terms. We just talked about mindset and about how you need to be on the offensive. You need to be asserting your case theory the entire time. You need to be asserting your arguments. Don't be on your heels responding. But by creating a separate rebuttal section, you're making a safe space to do that. And you don't look like you're on your heels. You don't look like you're afraid, like you're spending your entire closing responding to them. Setting fires. This works a little better for defense than it does for plaintiff. But essentially what that means is you pose slam dunk, unanswerable questions. And let's see if the plaintiff can answer that when they get back up here. Let's see if the plaintiff can tell us why Detective Beer didn't think it was necessary to take photos from behind the clerks. Let's see if we can explain why Detective Beer didn't even ask Dan Jones blah, blah, blah. Now, when it comes to setting fires, I can try and do my best. But I can't do it better than him. Johnny Cochran is truly the greatest of all times. Now, I'm about to show you a clip of the greatest fire. This is a forest fire. This one clip I'm about to show you probably got him the acquittal in this case. And let me set it up for a little bit. At this point in the OJ trial, it's been about 9 months. It's been an absolute media circus. Closing arguments are a couple days long. I think Johnny Cochran's was about 6 hours long. Yes, I've listened to it, and it is wonderful. And if you ever have 6 hours with nothing better to do, I would highly recommend you check it out. So the clip I'm about to show you, it's the very end, maybe last 45 minutes of his closing argument. And he's gonna set the fire of all fires. So I'm just gonna let him do it for you.
Now, as it comes time for me to conclude my remarks, I may never have an opportunity again to speak to you, certainly not in this setting, maybe when the case is over. As you've been told many, many times, there's a very heavy burden placed upon the people, and for good reason. Prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. As such, it is Ms. Clark's duty to answer for you, as best she can, any legitimate questions arising from the evidence, which we believe casts doubt upon Mr. Simpson's guilt. There may be 1,000 such questions in a case like this, which will be put to her, but we intend no such exercise. I do think, after careful deliberation, that it might be fair to suggest 15 questions, just 15 questions, which literally hang in the air in this courtroom at this moment. And as the time approaches for you to decide this case, for us to hand the baton to you. I offer these questions now as a most important challenge to the prosecution. The prosecution which claims that it's met its burden in this case. If that burden has in fact been met, you will be given logical, sensible, credible, satisfying answers to each of these 15 questions. If the questions are overwhelming and unanswerable, they will be ignored, or you'll be told that the prosecution has no obligation to answer questions. If you're given anything less than a complete, sensible, and satisfactory response, satisfying you beyond a reasonable doubt to these 15 questions, you'll quickly realize that the case really is transparent, and you'll think about the scenario that I just went through for you, and that the term smoke and mirrors that you heard about have applied to the defense. We prove real hard things for you, things that you can see, things you can take back in that jury room. And accordingly, you have to find Mr. Simpson not guilty. When I concluded, for Ms. Clark's convenience, should she decide to deal with these very troublesome questions, I'm going to leave a written list of these questions here when I conclude. Let me go over these 15 questions with you just briefly. 1. Why, they're on the monitor, did the blood show up on the sock almost 2 months after a careful search for evidence? And why, as demonstrated by Dr. Lee and Professor McDonald, was the blood applied when there was no foot in it? Think that's a fair question? In this case, let's see if she can answer that question.
Okay. Like I said, you spend 6 hours watching it yourself. Okay, so I want to unpack that for a second. There's a lot of things I like about that. I think first of all, he starts off with a headline. He tells them, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm setting fires. He spends a couple minutes teasing and alluding to the questions. I think he says these questions about 5, maybe even 6 times. So by the time he gets to the questions, there's been a pretty powerful windup. And everyone's kind of on the edge of their seat, like, what are they? What are you going to tell us? I think he excellently threads the needle on reasonable doubt. As defense counsel, we can never say, this is reasonable doubt. But he very, very strongly suggests that if they can't answer these 15 questions, that's reasonable doubt. And of course, it's an excellent summary of the case. We've got 9 months worth of information. We've got 6 hours worth of closing. And he puts a nice little bow on it. That whole clip is only about 15 minutes. And of course, as I keep mentioning, he poses questions. He could have said, why did the blood on the sock, why did the blood show up on the sock almost 2 months after a careful search for evidence? Why, as demonstrated by Dr. Lee, blah, blah, the blood was applied when there was no foot in it? Do you think that's more powerful than if he would have came out and said, the blood was applied when there was no foot in it because blah, blah, blah? But by posing the questions, again, he's leading them to water, and they really have no choice but to drink. They really have no choice but to answer these questions in a way that's favorable to them. And of course, my personal favorite, just being a smartass, I just love, I'm going to leave a list of these questions up here if he chooses to answer it. Oh my. I'll buy you lunch if anyone ever does that one. Techniques, the law.